The Budget versus Actual tab looks the same as the Budget tab, with the exception that it also reveals your actual numbers each month. You will not import your actual P&L into this tab. Your actual P&L will be pasted into your P&L Update tab each month, and it automatically imports to this tab when you do. You will notice that this tab has no tan cells whatsoever. This means there are no inputs required on this tab. Its purpose is to reveal how your actual performance is aligning with your planned performance. At the top of the screen, you will notice a series of small boxes with either plus signs or minus signs. Click on any one of these boxes and the actual column below it will either open or close. You may choose to have them all open all of the time, or to have only the most current month exposed while you're doing your analysis. You are able to open and close all of the boxes at once by clicking on the number 1 or number 2 in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. The number 2 box opens all the actual columns, and the number 1 box closes them all. You will notice that the budget numbers appear for the current month only after the actuals have been input into the control panel. This is intended to provide a cleaner look as you compare your current actuals with your current budget. If you want to look at other months' budgeted numbers, then you can refer back to the Budget tab. When analyzing your budget versus actual performance each month, you might prefer to do it slowly and methodically by comparing each revenue and each expense line by line from the top down, or you might prefer to look quickly at your 3 key measurements and then only look further if there's a problem with one of these measurements. For the quick review, the first key metric is your total revenues. If they are close to your forecasted revenues, then you move on to the next measurement. If they were well over or well under your forecasted revenues, then if you have multiple revenue sources, you would go up and find out which revenue sources are off. You can then quickly look at the second key metric, which is your gross profit percent. If your revenues were well over or under your forecasted revenues, your gross profit will likely look much different than your forecasted profit, but your gross profit percent should at least be similar to your budgeted percent. Your gross profit percent is the best indicator of your operational efficiencies, since it is measuring your revenues minus your production costs. If labor or materials got out of control, or if you underpriced your work, which would also cause your production expenses to be greater as a percent of revenues, it shows up in your gross profit percent. The third key metric is your total fixed costs. Since your fixed costs are usually administrative in nature, they will not move up or down with your revenues. So all we are looking for here is if your total fixed costs are in line with your total fixed cost budget. If so, there's no reason to go back and review them line by line unless you just want to. If your total is higher or lower than your budget, then we simply go back and find the expense or expenses that caused the variance. The performance of these 3 key metrics will determine what we find on the bottom line. Here we will see the individual month's profit or loss, and we will see the year-to-date profit or loss. As we scroll down a bit lower, we see an annual and monthly year-to-date break-even point. Your monthly break-even point is that point in the month when you have earned enough revenues to cover your direct and fixed costs. From that point forward, every dollar of revenue earned still has to pay for its associated direct costs, but all of your fixed costs are covered. This is when we start adding profit to the bottom line. In this example, you can see the break-even revenues are $97,000. You can see that this month, since the revenues for both January and February fell short of $97,000, they fell short of their break-even point. Starting in March, the revenues for every month well exceeded the break-even point. The greater the revenues exceeded the break-even point, the faster the profit accumulated. We have the same year-to-date analysis for the annual break-even point. We can see that his monthly costs are either higher than he anticipated in his budget, or his gross margin is much lower because his annual year-to-date break-even point is almost $100,000 more than his budgeted break-even point. As your company moves further into the year, you will also want to compare your year-to-date performance with your year-to-date plan. You can do this by scrolling to the right to a series of additional columns. These first 2 columns are called Year-to-Date Budget and Year-to-Date Actual. They are your year-to-date plan performance and your year-to-date actual performance. Each month, these 2 columns will tell you very quickly where you plan to be at this point in the year and where your company actually is financially. The next column over allows you to see your full annual budget without having to look back on the previous budget tab. And the next column over shows you a year-to-date comparison with how you are doing compared to this time last year. A negative number in this year-to-date difference column means you are behind last year's year-to-date numbers, and a positive number means you are that much ahead of this time last year. While a month is plenty of time to see how your three key metrics of total revenues, gross profit, and total fixed costs are doing, and how your people are performing relative to plan, it might not be enough time to consider if changes in strategy or tactics are necessary. These additional columns will provide that larger view as you progress further into the year.